right, Shalom.
Shalom.
We want to start out by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. And Shalom to all the occupied that pushing the word in sincerity and in truth. This is going to go into the last kingdom, the fall of Rome. In the scriptures, me and his brother, and of course a couple of brothers, been doing videos by and by on the different fall of major kingdoms. We went from Babylon, Syria, if I'm not mistaken, the Medo-Persian Empire, Greece, and last but not least, which the last is the greatest, of course, when you read the scriptures, the Roman Empire. Went into the inception of Rome, how Rome rose to prominence through war, through elevating itself as a city-state, taking over Greece, its military expansion, its high taxation, putting the Israelites into slavery as well as other nations, and having a heavy influence in the New World. And that was all significant points of the apex of Rome. Its economic side, on its entertainment side, its trade routes, its theaters, the influence of on the whole of why Rome was made great. It was very, very, very many facets, or very many things that made Rome great. And it was a lot of things that hindered Rome because, Rome wasn't built upon the law, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Shema Shah. So by and by, that kingdom fell little by little, and we're going to highlight all the points on why Rome fell and show, of course, we don't even have to, it goes without saying, show why America's going to fall. But, of course, we're living in Rome all over again and seeing all these things. You can see without a shadow of a doubt that America's going to fall just as such. So without further ado, we'll I want to jump into this article under the History Channel, and it's on 8 reasons why Rome fell. First is invasion by barbarian tribes. It says the most straightforward theory for Western Rome's collapse pins the fall on a string of military losses sustained against outside forces. Right, so you had Eastern and you had Western Rome, and it was broken up into 2 kingdoms because of how big it was. So they basically established it, established the both poles from east to west. It says Rome had tangled with Germanic tribes for centuries, but by the 300s, barbarian groups like the Goths had encroached beyond the empire's border. The Roman withered a Germanic uprising in the late 4th century, but in 410, the Visigoths, King Alaric, successfully sacked the city of Rome. The empire spent the next several decades under constant threat before the Eternal City was raided again in 455, this time by the Vandals. Finally, in 476, the Germanic leader Odoacer staged a revolt and deposed the Emperor Romulus Augustulus. From then on, no Roman Empire would ever again rule from a post in Italy, leading many to cite 476 as the year the Western Empire suffered its death blow. Yeah, and that's heavy. Nobody at that time would even dream or believe that Rome itself would fall from its glory. As great of his kingdom as it was, it fell to so-called mere barbarian tribes.
Yeah, that was poor.
Mm-hmm.
Those barbarian tribes, some of them started in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them was already enemies of Rome too as well.
Yep, that's right. All right, continuing on. Number 2, economic troubles and over-reliance on slave labor. Hey, isn't that what's going on today? The average worker's working 40, 45 hours a week. And you see the federal government relies on slave labor. That's why building this wall, what's the first thing Donald Trump turned to? The slaves of the people, the citizens. He did tax cuts. Or what was it called? The with Donald Trump imposing not sanctions,
Was it
a government shutdown.
Oh, okay,
It was a government shutdown, and you see how many individuals had to leave the post of work for a number of time. And he was also looking to get funded by the citizens to to build the wall, so that can go into over-reliance of slave labor also.
Yeah, and then I was finna mention because I thought you mentioned Obama.
Mhm.
Obama term, if you don't have health insurance, then they would garnish your tax money
Mm-hmm.
that you get.
And they need that tax money, to help, facilitate, better means, so to speak, in their kingdom. But it says, even as Rome was under attack from outside forces, it was also crumbling from within thanks to a severe financial crisis. And we're going through that financial crisis now. I just sent the article earlier today going into how basically trucks are losing large percentages of companies. The companies that are pushing out cargo, it's down spiraling. And of course, I think they said like 70% of freight is distributed by truck labor. So when a trucking crisis occurs, then that's when the crisis on the whole of imports and products comes to an extreme halt. You see? So it says, constant wars and overspending had significantly lightened imperial coffers, and oppressive taxation and inflation had widened the gap between the rich and poor. Right. Oh, if you, of course, you want to.
That's America at its best, man. Because on this side, the richer are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And also, too, Esau got a lot of wars out there. America has a lot of wars, a lot of battles. Hell, they going over there to other people's countries starting wars.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, it's perfect on how United States of America is a reflection of Rome.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, the oppressive taxation. Like we just spoke about how the Obama Medicare tax, if you weren't to pay for health care, then they would garnish a percentage of your wages. And the reason why people don't pay for health care because it's too goddamn expensive, man. That's a major reason. And these people aren't taught how to be nutritionists, aren't taught how to
Yeah, to eat properly. Yeah, so
Eat.
you'll stay away out the doctor office unless you got a broken arm or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only reason you can go. The only reason is the doctor that there's for anyway. Totality. Like if you really need the doctor, like it's a broken arm or broken neck. But other than that, you don't need to go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Advanced deficiency, so to speak. But the minor deficiencies, you're supposed to know how to take care of yourself. But see, that's another thing with the government. They made the government over-reliant onto the corporations, and the corporations over-reliant on the slave labor.
Right.
And that connection is a bad on both fields of the spectrum.
In Revelation 18, he said he has the souls of men.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it says, an oppressive taxation and inflations had widened the gap between the rich and poor. And the middle class, they're starting to be classified as the poor. Either you're super rich or you're super poor. You see? It don't matter if you're making $60,000, $70,000 a year. Most people that's making $60,000, $70,000 a year, that's all debt. They're still heavily in debt. If you look at their value on a whole, they might be, might have $200,000 in school student loan debt, $100,000, Then they might have mortgage payments, they might have car payments, and all these different things, and it's keeping them down. But it says, in the hope of avoiding the tax man, many members of the wealthy classes had even fled to the countryside and set up independent fiefdoms. At the same time, the empire was rocked by a labor deficit. Rome's economy depended on slaves to till its fields. Matter of fact, you get James the 5th chapter on that, where it goes into the plowman.
Yeah.
Rome's economy depended on slaves to till its fields and work as craftsmen, and its military might have traditionally provided a fresh influx of conquered people to put to work. But when expansion ground to a halt in the 2nd century, Rome's supply of slaves and other war treasures began to dry up. A further blow came in the 5th century when the Vandals claimed North Africa and began disrupting the empire's trade by prowling the Mediterranean as pirates. With its economy faltering, its commercial and agricultural production in decline, the empire began to lose its grip on Europe. So America's losing the same grip as the ancient Rome did. Even though it's still at the time, they still was looking like they was at the apex of their glory. what was they doing? Keeping people bombarded with entertainment, with the delicacies and debauchery, sex fests and bacchanalia celebrations. You know, like I said, bread and circus, not knowing that this kingdom was slowly losing their grip and grasp of the whole world.
Yeah,
They had
people wasn't into politics.
Mhm.
Wasn't into what was really important at that time. Just like now, people are just into bread and circus.
Mhm.
You got this.
Yeah, people. No, you got that's a good point. A lot of people didn't take politics serious. They thought it was a thing of, all right, that's what the big guys do. We in our world, we do what we do. Let the businessmen do their business talk. Let the politicians do the political talk. And us peasants, we do what we do. You see, you got that?
Yep. It's like James chapter 5. James chapter 5 verse 1. Go to now, you rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you.
Mm-hmm. And who was the rich man at that time? We just read about the elitists. Now, of course, in today's time, you have the Illuminati, the Illuministic bankers, the the big wigs, the top men of the echelons. Like you just had this billionaire that just got killed in jail. Awaiting his I think if I'm not mistaken, he was awaiting his court date, and Epstein, and that's all even showing that America's or the powers that be are losing their power.
You're committing suicide. And you a billionaire?
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Keep going on that.
Come on. It says your riches are corrupt and your garments are moth eating. Your gold, and it is because they got all their money from by enslaving the children of Israel, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. And it says your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them should be a witness against you.
Yeah, which I don't know if they have on this article, but that was a major thing in Rome too. Was the weakening of the denarius, their financial standard. The denarius started to by and by be I would say diluted by insufficient minerals, and they would do that to expand their financial means. That was a form of inflation, which will really inflated the money and made it where the value of it by and by became more and more weaker, and made it more abundant. So what you could buy for, let's say, one denarius, now you got to buy for 2 or 3. You see, but they needed more to pump more and more in circulation to balance out the standard to the common man, because what a bigger population is bigger people. With more people, you need more money, and they wanted to make it seem equate to the point that they actually had enough money for enough people when truly they didn't. They just used the witchcraft. That's why it says that their gold is moth eaten. I mean their garments are moth eaten, and their gold and their silver is what is it? It's cankered. Because the canker sore by and by opens up, and it tears perpetually, and that kingdom started to tear perpetually. You see?
Mm-hmm. That's how it is with America, and that happened around 1971 with forgot that cat who was in office. It was one of them presidents that was in office, but he took away the gold standard.
I think FDR.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had the gold confiscation acts, where they took the gold from circulation. That's why you have all these cash for gold offices even unto this day. Stripping the gold out of the system and giving individuals Federal Reserve notes, bank notes, debt notes.
Yep. But a debt note is the world currency right now. Like you're going into, they're lessening the value of this world currency that was put on the pedestal by Bretton Woods.
Mm-hmm.
It's a private sector that promotes or says or gives the authority for the world currency, so to speak.
That's right.
You got it.
Okay. That was the main point of that?
No, I still got some more. It says, and the rest of them should be a witness against you.
Yeah, and the rest of them should be a witness. It's a evident witness that this place is falling. All right? Just like it was an evidence witness that Rome was falling. And if the people, it wasn't, everybody wasn't seeing Rome fall. You had political projectors, you had individuals, what they would call in today's time analysts, and some of them would go as far as calling them conspiracy theorists in today's time, that seen that that ancient Rome was falling. You know, they combed through situations, and they started to see that the government was full of deception, lies, and trickery, and they started to see that that kingdom that was so big and popular was losing its grip. You see, but majority of the people didn't believe him. They thought that it was a hoax. They thought it was all BS. They're like, look, do you see how great Rome is? Because Rome was great.
Yeah, Rome was great. Yeah,
You know,
in the known world.
in the known world, that was the kingdom. That was the empire that everybody went to. You know, that was the empire that ruled over many, and they had abundance of money. You had the super rich that lived in Rome. You know,
In fact, Rome stayed that way. I mean, they changed it to Byzantine, but it was still known as that Rome.
mm-hmm,
All the way up to the Ottoman Turks took them down,
mm-hmm,
and that's when they started the advanced weaponry and stuff like that.
yeah,
But yeah, Rome was a great. It was a great country.
that's right. And that's the main point, right?
Nah, I still got some more. It says,
Okay.
the rest of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasures together for the last days.
Yeah. What's those treasures that's heaped? The gold and silver in abundance that Rome actually had. You know, the money that they actually had was being built up and it slowly basically got taken away from them because they got ransacked. You know, but of course that prophecy really is fulfilled in today's time with America. That's why I said that they have heaped together treasures for the last days. And we're in the last days, and the elites are the ones that are they own the treasure houses, which the modern day treasure houses is the banks. You know, and all that money is not for them to hoard and to keep, but it's for the elect or the righteous to put on.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But that was it on that one.
Okay.
I mean, unless you wanted me, because I know you building up that fact that they got their money off the slave reapers.
That's it.
Verse 4. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth.
Mm-hmm.
And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth.
Right, so they was being defrauded. How were the slaves being defrauded? Just went into it. How the money was being constantly devalued. So if you would work for, let's say for instance you would do your day's work and you would get a percentage. Say for instance you would get a drachma or I would say shekel. Say for instance, let's use shekels. You work a day and you get a shekel wage. Of course, it might be more or less, whatever. That's not the point. But you work a day's work and you get a shekel wage. What they would do is they would take that shekel and they would dilute it and make it, times 3, so to speak. So, saving that same shekel that you would get paid, it would be divided in a third. So you're basically getting paid a third of a shekel. You see?
Yeah. That's how this dollar is.
It's still looked at like a shekel, but 30% of that mineral or material that's actually valuable is actually located in that coin. The rest is just garbage. You're getting paid basically trash, and that trash is going in circulation, and you're working for basically 30% of the wages that you're supposed to. Now you're doing that yearly, and everybody's doing that. All these citizens are constantly working. So that means what? That their percentages of their money is being cut. On top of the fact that they're getting taxed a large percentage of even that of which they're making. So that makes you a slave.
Yep.
But what was going on was the slaves were catching on to the madness, and they were protesting, they were fighting against it. And a lot of those barbarians recruited a lot of slaves, and a lot of those slaves actually were willing to fight against Rome. That's why when you watch movies like Spartacus, you see how a lot of those slaves, it was easy to recruit them because they already had a strong hatred for Rome any damn way, man. But I'm gonna continue on because that's a beautiful point. Like I said, the ones that reaped, the ones that worked the fields, they started to come against the powers that be. Yeah. And with all those plagues hitting your kingdom, it's very, very hard to come up. So continuing on, it says the rise of the Eastern Empire. The fate of Western Rome was partially sealed in the late 3rd century when the Emperor Diocletian divided the empire into two halves, the Western Empire seated in the city of Milan and the Eastern Empire in Byzantium, later known as Constantinople. The division made the empire more easily governable in the short time, but over time the two halves drifted apart. You see? And you have what? You have the EU and NATO, and what's going on now? The Brexit. So you have these conglomerate leaders, these major forces that's coming together as a supreme unit, and that unit is shifting apart. It's like broken glass. And what happens? Parts of the government look to forcefully have individuals bow down, and that breaks out into war. You see?
Yeah.
On top of the fact that here in America you have, you had the California looking to break off from the United States government, Texas as well. And what does the scripture says is that, if I'm not mistaken,
A house divided
Mhm.
against each other shall not stand.
And- was that Matthew, if I'm not mistaken, 12 and 25? Satan's house divided against itself. It'll verily come to naught. It'll come to nothing.
Yeah.
And this is a prime example. I'm gonna read a little bit more, and if that's it, then of course you go into it. It says East and West failed to adequately work together to combat outside threats, and the two often squabbled over resources and military aid. As the Gulf widened, the largely Greek-speaking Eastern Empire grew in wealth, while the Latin-speaking Western descended into economic crisis. And we see that even in America today. You see parts of the United States that's fallen into crisis, and you see that other parts of the government or parts of the U.S. don't want to even deal with them. You've been having this situation in Chicago, all these murders and things of that nature. And the government will try to keep up and try to help it out, but guess what? It's too much things that's going on.
Right.
You might have a criminal, basically a crime center in one part of the world, and you might have, burnings in California, where it's natural problems. You see?
Then you got the water crisis down here. States fighting over water down here still.
Mm-hmm.
And then the desolate water up there in Michigan. It's all type of crisis. Then Trump trying to build that wall. He can't keep up with it, so this country is steadily declining.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it says, most importantly, the strength of Eastern Empire served to divert barbarian invasions to the West. See, so they're still dealing with war, just like America. America, the troop, as the saying goes, the troops never go home, because the troops are still dealing with war. All those bases that America's in, AFRICOM and all these different coms.
Fort Valley.
Yeah. And what does it say that he neither keepeth at home. So even the troops, they can't go home. So they're tied in knots with in these different countries, on top of domestic terrorists, all these different terrorist attacks that's going on top of the outskirts. That's why you had Trump trying to get with Kim Jong-un to come in forms of peace. He's just trying to keep peace for a time. Scripture speak about through peace destroyed many. He's trying to keep peace temporarily so that they can actually control their grips. And these different nations see that, and they're going to capitalize off of that. But I'm just going to jump to the point. It's still more on going into the fall. But it says overexpansion and military spending. Military overspending. Now look at America's federal budget. Where does majority of the money go towards? You have of course, the economic side. You have the military. You have the medicine. You have, of course, which falls along the line of health. It's so many different departments where the federal budget goes towards, and who's paying? First off, the federal budget. Who's paying the federal government is taxpayers, and all the federal spending is going towards the military. So America suffers both overexpansion. They're stretching their military too thin, stretching their kingdom too thin.
And they got to provide food, shelter for their soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
even if they ain't battling on the field and stuff like that. Because a lot of people go to the army to achieve their goals or college degrees and stuff like that, to have security around their job. Esau painted a picture, a lie about that, but Esau has to make up for that by putting the monies in there.
Mm-hmm.
And what Joel chapter 3 says, turn your pruning hooks into spears.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they gotta pay for war weaponry anyway.
That's right. So it said, at its height, the Roman Empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Euphrates River in the Middle East, but its grandeur may have also been its downfall. With such a vast territory to govern, the empire faced an administrative and logistical nightmare. Yeah, the logistics of America. No, excuse me. that's the spirit, but of Rome, was basically falling. Because with the logistics they had to take care of different parts of wherever they had conquered. So they would have to maybe import products. They would have to feed whether the military or the people. They had which that transportation goes into fuel. They had to pay for the fuel. The fuel had to go to transport products, whether it was weaponry, whether it was food supply. So they had to have an abundance of food to actually take care of them, which they were suffering even that in the agricultural ring. To take it to them, to feed it, to bring it back constantly. And the more wars and the more places that the troops was headed to, is the more logistics, the more resources,
That's
the
how
more
they got
fuel.
over Hannibal too.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hannibal, with his soldiers, Rome conquered him because his soldiers was faint, and some of them turned back, and they wanted to complete their war. I think it was around the winter time or something, close to the spring, the end of winter, and they was faint. So Esau got to keep that momentum up of paying, and I think they was exhausted too. Their army monies and stuff like that was exhausted because of Hannibal too.
Mm-hmm.
One of the generals that went against Rome.
That's right. So it says, even with their excellent road system, the Romans were unable to communicate quickly or efficiently enough to manage their holdings. Rome struggled to marshal enough troops and resources to defend its frontiers from local rebellions and outside attacks. And by the 2nd century, the Emperor Hadrian was forced to build his famous wall in Britain just to keep the enemy at bay. As more and more, what it said? Emperor Hadrian was forced to build his famous wall in Britain. You see, today's time, the famous wall that that America's looking to build is the border.
Yeah.
That's why it says as I'm gonna read that over. The Emperor Hadrian was forced to build his famous wall in Britain just to keep the enemy at bay, and a lot of those immigrants, they're coming to America, and that's further damaging America. You see, and it's not just damaging just because the people are here. You got more war. You got, like they say, the war on terror, and you have the war on drugs. It's a lot of drug flow that's going on in America, which is dilapidating the very fiber of this system. So it says, as more and more funds were funneled into the military upkeep of the empire, technological advancement slowed, and Rome's civil infrastructure fell into despair.
So there wasn't no innovation in that region. So they couldn't provide a competition with the other nations that was seeking power too, because they was always indebted in war to try to conquer countries and nations. But that was their downfall.
That's right. And it spoke about how the civil infrastructure fell into despair. And we see in America, Isaiah the 14th chapter tells you that how your gold is the worm shall overtake thee. The worm represents the infrastructure. Matter of fact, you get that Isaiah 14, just quick precept. The worm represents the infrastructure. And you see how all these different buildings, all these different road systems are basically at a grade F. Not a D or a C, it's an F. It's F for failing, It's damn near, you ride through these different roads, you ride through these different bridges, damn near feeling like you're finna fall through them, man.
You got damn near change lanes, and when you're rolling on one side of the street because it's a big old pothole.
Yeah, depending on the certain cities you live in, it feel like you're driving over damn dead bodies,
Especially in Jake neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. And they can't take care of it. Why? Because it's going through the same, it's mirroring as New Rome is as Old Rome.
And they always saying that voting helps the people. Voting ain't do nothing ever since voting was invented,
That's right.
man. Voting is an illusion. This is Isaiah chapter 14, verse 11. Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy vows, the worm is spread under thee. Matter of fact, let me read from verse 10.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah chapter 14, verse 10. All they should speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we?
Mm-hmm.
Art thou become like unto us? Esau is the head now, just like Rome. Rome was the head too.
And the barbarians and the other kingdoms started seeing how weak Rome started to be. Right. Because what? They stretched themselves out too thin.
And they was hiring, matter of fact, Rome hired barbarians too.
Mm-hmm.
To go out and do their wars, but they wasn't receiving the spoils that the Rome got too. And that's what, I just seen an article too, a contractor, they put a contract on the spot for murdering people over there in Afghanistan over in 2007. And those contractors too are going to be those same barbarians too in modern day time.
That's right. And it don't matter how big of a kingdom is. You got to think how big you are. You could still be defeated. Floyd Mayweather, if you put enough people on his head, he's going to lose. It don't matter how much of a defensive fighter he is. It doesn't matter how many skills and tactics that he has developed over the space of time. You could put amateurs. You know, you could get 20, 16-year-olds that never fought a day in their life, and you put them against one person that's pretty skillful. You know, it could be an even match. You know. Yeah. Now, of course, they got the skill to knock a individual out. You know, slug for slug, so to speak. But depending on the circumstance, that group may stand a formidable chance, and they may be able to take them down. And I say all that just to say it don't matter how big or how strong a kingdom is. If you have enough people to bombard that kingdom, it doesn't matter how many skills they possess. They're gonna be overthrown. You even look at that with ants. You see thousands of ants, you know, pile up on a certain animal, and it's gone, man.
Yeah.
You see, so it's the same thing that was going on this big beast, which is Rome. You keep going.
Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy vows, the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee.
The worms cover thee. The worms, when you look it up, it goes into corrosion. You see? And what's the main thing that's been corroding? These building systems, these road systems. It takes too much money to cover all these grounds, man. Because like we just read about the federal budget, the federal spending is not going towards these bridge systems. It's not going towards the infrastructure. The infrastructure is being heavily neglected because the money has to go towards war. You know, the war, you know, it has to go towards all these different alternative means. But that's the main point.
And I got a diagram too for that. It just named a few. But they are spending billions of dollars on nonsense, man. Medicare, 1.0.8. It's like $1.08 billion. Medicare and health. Social Security, $1.7 billion. $29.8 billion for science. Energy and environment, $44.8 billion. International affairs, $50 billion. Housing and community, $61.5 billion. Transportation, $85 billion.
And they're struggling through all these different things, man.
They are.
You know, they're not holding up, you know, without flexing.
Their military is the most, though. Their military is $609.3 billion.
$609.3 billion. That's a lot of money that's going towards the military. That's a lot of money that's going towards war, artillery. Like just said, the logistics, all these different things. Planes. Because the military isn't just the ground troopers, so to speak. You got the Army, you have the Navy, you have the Air Force, you know. So, you know, paying for all these different things and going overseas and things of that nature takes a lot of money. And that's why there's a conspiracy against the veterans that come back from overseas.
Yeah,
They look
close eye watch on them.
They look at them like they bugged out, but really they don't have enough money to keep paying for them. They can't pay for all these different veterans that's coming and war and coming home. They damn near have to scratch tooth and nail to benefit after fighting these wars, because the government only had enough money to take care of you fighting the war, not take care of you.
Right.
That's not part of the plan, is to take care of you. They need to conquer nations to take resources. They're not gonna pay you, basically take care of you while taking care of all the resources that they are actually getting. They need primarily resources to expand more, to take over more places, and they have enemies, major enemies, that's doing the same thing. But I'm gonna continue on. It says that was the main point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Government corruption and political instability. I'm gonna hold off on that. Lord, will not just read that one and leave off on the other two. Number 6, the arrival of the Huns and migration of the barbaric tribes. Number 7, Christianity and the loss of traditional values. Which that was really Jake coming into power, Jake coming into providence. Hey, because really Esau's lost their traditional values. What's some of the values they lost? First and foremost, niggas getting it, so-called niggas, getting into positions of power, right. Political positions of power.
Jake out here stunting on Esau now.
Jake has strength to voice their opinion, and Esau can't do anything about it. If you were to touch or basically come against certain individuals, you would have storms of Negroes and Latinos that will come against whoever's coming against them. You got politicians that will use the N-word or use certain, vulgar language or vulgar speech, and the next thing they have to resign for office, man.
Yeah, they can lose their job.
They can lose their job. When back in the day, you would have blackface on TV. You would have politicians that were known racists, and they wouldn't be touched. So the traditional values of America is falling, man.
Yeah, it's real finished.
It's finished. You see, on top of, even if you look at how America was back in the day, how the women were, the traditional style of clothing that they would wear. Now all these women are whores. You have the feminist movement. Everything is being transitioned. Oh, homosexuality. That's not a traditional value.
Right. That's not a moral value right there. That's bad.
Yeah.
That's degrading. That's why all these nations are saying, like, you become weak as weak. Because you having transgenders in your army, you definitely go crazy. Their mind is not all the way there.
And it spoke about how Christianity started to spring up. Now, what's Christianity? The Israelites were called Christians first in Antioch. So the original Christians are Israelites. The Israelites have woken up to the nationality to being the true Israelites in these times now too. And they're prophesying what? On these street corners. Bringing out, like Scripture says in Isaiah the 47th chapter, lifting the skirt on this whore. That's doing a number. Just like Christianity was doing a number back then. They didn't have to physically touch the government. But what? The words that they were speaking. The level of influence that word had amongst the people to keep an eye and to not be tricked and caught by the deception of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, they kept that going throughout that time. Especially after the apostles and stuff died.
I'm going to read a little bit on it. The decline of Rome dovetailed with the spread of Christianity, and some have argued that the rise of a new faith helped contribute of the empire's fall. And this is the Scripture says in Corinthians, how the Lord has set forth the apostles last. So the rise of a new faith, which this is the new faith, has sprung to show the fall of the Empire of Rome. It's a lot more on this, but that's just the main point. It's a lot more. Brothers want to read this article. This is a beautiful article, But continuing on, it says weakening of the Roman legions. So the matter of fact, I'm gonna read it. For most of its history, Rome's military was the envy of the ancient world, but during the decline, the makeup of the once mighty legions began to change. Unable to recruit enough soldiers from the Roman citizenry, emperors like Diocletian and Constantine began hiring foreign mercenaries to prop up their armies. And America's trying to prop up their armies now. the ranks of the legions eventually swelled with, like you just said, you spoke about that earlier, how the barbarians started to be hired. The ranks of the legions eventually swelled with Germanic Goths and other barbarians, so much so that the Romans began using the Latin word barbarus in place of soldier. See, so it became such a big thing that barbarous was the new word for soldier, and it was so many of them. And when Rome started to lose their power, it was like, damn, they already got inside infiltration.
Yeah, that's the same thing is gonna happen to these contractors in the military. They're gonna go against. They're gonna start taking over. And seditions among men.
Sedition
they should
among
not regard their princes.
The kings, yeah.
Yep. And so martial law troops gonna come over here. Don't speak no English, kicking your door like apostles been saying.
Mm-hmm.
And they just gonna wreak havoc.
That's right. Matter of fact, you can read that. Matter of fact, I'll read it in Second Ezra, the 15th chapter, because that does go into government corruption. I do want to read a little bit on that. Then we'll stick to the scripts. This is Second Ezra 15 and 16. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Right. And it's coming. It's not even coming. We're in those times now where people aren't giving a mother F about the government. Why you think everybody's speaking about Donald Trump? Jake is blatantly saying, fuck Donald Trump. The hell with Donald Trump. Nobody really likes Donald Trump, from Robert De Niro to majority of these actors.
John Legend just said something a week ago.
Yeah, John Legend. All rappers.
On camera. Mm-hmm. Usually they'd be like, treason.
You have a lot of these Trump supporters getting the living shit beat out of them. They're getting beat up and hospitalized for just having a MAGA hat on.
Yeah, at the restaurant, getting embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, like you said, man, they regarding their princes, man.
And I regarding the princes and king because what? They see, which Numbers 5 says, government corruption and political instability is taking place. So I'm going to read this last little bit, and that basically fully covers it. If Rome's sheer size made it difficult to govern, ineffective and inconsistent leadership only served to magnify the problem. And what does the scripture speak about in Sirach? If I'm not mistaken,
when did it go against? Which says Sirach?
I think Sirach 5, where it speaks about how a wicked government is if the government is wicked, then everybody that's in the government is going to be wicked. Matter of fact, with Sirach 10 and 3, an unwise king destroyeth his people, but through the prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. Right, so that government corruption, it deals with unwise kings, because an unwise king, it flows through an unwise kingdom, and you see that now going on. Who's the unwise king in today's time? Donald Trump. He's a damn fool. He's a corporate businessman in a position of politics, man, and he's thinking of politics as business, But it says, being the Roman Empire had always been a particularly dangerous job, but during the tumultuous 2nd and 3rd centuries, it nearly became a death sentence. Civil war thrust the empire into chaos. Hey, that's why now they're putting anybody in the power, because it is a death sentence. They just put Obama in office. Let's put a nigga there to make it seem like he's the face of the room. Let's put a businessman here. They're just throwing any and everybody in the office now. They're not sticking to the guidelines that they traditionally went to. It's starting to become very, very entertaining, so to speak, in politics nowadays.
Yeah.
Everybody's leaning towards politics for the entertainment. It's not taken seriously,
Yeah.
And that's really just the main point. It's a lot more that I could read on that. Of course.
Daniels too?
No, not Daniel. I hit 2nd Ezra 11, and then we'll just close. If you had a precept that you want to go with, then that'd be cool. But like I was saying, that all those things foreshadow the final kingdom, which really that deadly wound being healed is America. And it's holding up all the things that ancient Rome actually did, and it's falling just like ancient Rome did. You see? So this is 2nd Ezra 11, and I'll start at 40. And the fourth came, and that fourth represents Rome, and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. We just read about the wicked oppression of the taxation. And so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit, for the earth hast thou not judged with truth. For thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and destroyed the dwelling of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. Therefore is thy wrongful dealing come up unto the highest, and thy pride unto the mighty. The highest also have looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled. And therefore appear no more, thou eagle. The eagle represents Rome. Rome's symbol of power was the eagle. Nor thy horrible wings. The wings represents the Caesars. Nor thy wicked feathers. And the wings also are a symbol of exaltation, because Rome was heavily exalted. And when the wings are plucked, guess what? The kingdom falls. Nor thy wicked feathers. The feathers represent the Caesars. The 12 feathers in 2nd Ezra 11. Nor thy malicious heads. The malicious heads represents the leaders and the politicians. We just read about government and political scandals and wickedness, and we see that now with Pizzagate. You know, you seeing how all these different wicked government leaders, whoever's indicted, you know, they might have represented certain government leaders, or they might have a connection with certain government leaders. But then, you know, they might have get acquitted, you know, because they know how to pay the right money and put the right money in the right pockets. But at the end of the day, it's still being evident that these individuals are corrupt, the malicious heads. Nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body. And what's the hurtful claws? The government. Not the government, that pushes the military. Because the claws are what clamps down, grabs tight, and strangles. When you see how hawks or eagles, whatever malicious bird of apex bird takes down its prey, they use those extreme talons to strangle and to sever, you know, whatever that they have in grasps. It says, nor all thy vain body, verse 46, that all the earth may be refreshed and may return, being delivered from thy violence, and that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her. Right, so we're looking for this kingdom to fall so that the world will be turned back to new. The word return is to turn back. Turn back to what? The times of Genesis, the beginning. So we went through the kingdoms of Babylon, the Persians, and the Medes, all these different wicked kingdoms. And the next kingdom, as it is written, of course, in Daniel, that millstone that crushes all other kingdoms, after that falls, Revelation 21, you know, the prophecies will be unfolded for the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of righteousness to be fully set in stone. So you had anything, or you good? Oh, got something? Okay.
This is Matthew chapter 12, verse 25. Okay. And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, everyone divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself should not stand.
Mm-hmm.
And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the brother just read through the eight ways that how Rome fell. And this is what's happening right now to this day. You got America, you got politicians going against each other, you know, Democrats and Republicans. And then you got, even on the world, international scale, you got the European Union going against America too, in certain ways, like the Brexit and stuff like that. So America is finished, man, because America is ruled by Satan.
That's right.
So Satan being the adversary of first and foremost the Most High and the Son and the nation of Israel, they divided. Then you know it's going to be hell for them even more.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they got a goal out to seek the New World Order and stuff like that, that's not going to be accomplished because of the prophecies of saying that, you know, Satan is going to be destroyed.
So, you know, with that, anybody giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom Akim.
Shalom.